Okay, so I've been talking about doing a video on editing an image for a print, and I wanted to just go ahead and record one here for you and show you my process. So I use Photoshop, um, and what I've done is we're going to hit File New. I'm going to create a new document, and I want to have this measured in inches. I want this to be 300 pixels per inch. You want a high resolution. 300 is kind of standard. That makes it to where it's not super huge, like a 400 or 600 or something, but it also has high quality for like a 300 DPI printing process. That's dots per inch. So PPI, DPI can equate to each other. We want this to be a CMYK color mode, because RGB color mode is for it gives you a good idea, of course, like a one-to-one idea of what things will look like on a computer monitor. But a CMYK color mode is going to give us a good idea of what something will look like once it's printed. So it kind of limits the colors that the monitor produces to help replicate what you might see once it's printed through the CMYK color process of printing. That's cyan, magenta, yellow, and key black. So we want that. And then my image, my original image, the painting itself is 14 by 18. And what I think I might do, I took this picture of it, is create a document that is just an inch larger on either side, so that when I edit you'll see when I crop the image, it'll be at its correct size. And then I can always downsize it from there, but I'd like my original image to be as large as possible without losing detail that you could get by enlarging a smaller photo. So I'd rather it be large from the get-go. So the width then is going to be 16, and the height will be 20. If I did my math correctly, we'll see. I'm going to create this document. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is create some guidelines to kind of pull in the margins by about an inch. So we're going to go ahead and go 1 inch in on this side. I'm holding down Shift while I'm doing this so that it locks to certain sort of grid marks. Okay, so I have my margins here. Now what I want to do is, what you could do is you could like open the image in a different Photoshop file and then drag it in. That's what I used to do before I knew better. Now I go File, Place Embedded. Okay, if I go to my downloads, this is an image I sent myself via email from my phone. And this is it here. Now it's a smart image. So right now it looks like it's smaller than what I want it to be. But it just loads in to fill the space of the document that you create. Okay. And a smart image basically means that if you make it large or small, it will retain its original ratio so that you're not going to get pixelation, basically. So we're going to go ahead and make this about the right size, and hopefully it will fill in that space. And it actually did fill it in pretty well. So as far as taking the picture goes, you just want that picture to be pretty well lit without glare. So what I like to do is I like to have sort of a window open. An overcast day that's kind of bright, if you can have that here in Washington, is a good day to take a photo because you don't get all this glare from the sun. Right now, the sun is pretty shiny, and so what I did was I just took my easel that I took my photo, here you can see the photo, and I just spun it to the side a little bit to where it's kind of it's not in shadow, but it's just kind of getting indirect light, and then I took the picture from there. We're going to mess with some of the image itself to where we can get a better idea of our quality of our image here. So you can see it kind of lines up pretty well, actually. There's a little bit of a gap over here, so I'm actually going to just enlarge it a little bit. And you can see there's a slight slant, like this is peeking out the other side. Now, you don't have to be as perfect with this as the way I would like to be here. We're going to move it over a little bit. So the top looks good, but like you could just crop it right here and probably be happy, but I'm going to go ahead and show you a couple of things. So I'm just enlarging it a little bit. When it comes in ready to transform. So when you see this box with this blue X through it, that's transformable. And so we're just transforming the image here a little bit. keeping it as a smart object for now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to this corner. And normally, if you mess with this corner, it's going to resize the whole image, right? I'm going to hold down Control, and I'm just going to, that's going to grab that corner like this so I can kind of mess with it. I'm just going to bring it up a little bit to where it's hitting that corner a little better. This corner looks okay to me. And we're going to do this here too. Now, one thing you don't want to do is, let's say that the image came in like this. You don't want to stretch that image out like this, or else you're going to have a problem. So it's better to have the image larger than your box that you're trying to fit it within, and then move the image inward towards that box. Otherwise, things get pixelated and look funky. By the way, there's not really a science to this, like a perfect science to this, because lenses, well, there probably is a perfect science, but it might be unaffordable. Camera lenses can warp things. Camera lenses can focus on one aspect of an image, and so like here in the middle, probably things look pretty good in terms of texture, but out towards the outer edges, you can see things kind of blur just a little bit. Not a big fan of that. Now, there's a way in which you could address that, which is to take multiple pictures and then assemble them into Photoshop, and I've done that before with large paintings. I don't think that's necessary for this painting. I could potentially do a video on that later, but I do just want to see that like everything looks pretty good through here. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, what am I going to do? I'm going to grab this marquee tool right here, and I'm going to go into here, and it's just going to click right into these guiding lines, okay? And just as a test, I'm going to click on this layer and hold down Control and hit J. And then I'll hide the layer that I was clipping from. And what that did was it took that image within the bounding box and it just duplicated it. So I've got two layers here. Now the bottom layer, the layer I clipped from, or I duplicated from, is the smart layer. As soon as I duplicate, the layer that I've duplicated, like the new layer, is not a smart layer. And so if I was to resize this down to a smaller size and then set it at that smaller size and then make it big again, we'd end up with pixelation. In fact, I'll just show you real quick. So let's make this super small. Okay, and then let's bring it back. You can see what happened. It's terrible, right? That's not good. So this is why you got to be really careful when you're taking your pictures, not to make them shrink them down, like keep them as a smart object, not to shrink them down and then enlarge them, or to enlarge them bigger than they were originally. So this is why I'm trying to get this 14 by 18 image. I'm going to hit Control Z a couple times, and we've restored it to what it was. Okay. So this is ostensibly a 14 by 18 image, and I'm just going to actually remove these guides by going to the View, Clear Guides, and we're just going to look and see if I have any problems at the edges of the background showing or anything like that. I think it looks pretty good. Now you can see here I didn't paint that. So in fact, this painting I'm not entirely sure it's finished, but I'm happy with it for this purpose. Okay, now we get to edit this. One thing I'm going to actually do, because this won't be a print size, I don't have a 20 by 16 print size currently. I'm actually going to hold down Control and click in this box, and it's going to select what's in this on this layer. And I'm going to go ahead and go to Image, Crop. Okay, so what did that do? That took those inches, the margins out. Like we are now dealing with a different image size. So if we go to Image Size here, under Image, you see that our image size is now 14 by 18, whereas when we created it, it was 16 by 20, right? But we're still at 300 pixels per inch. And just as an FYI, this is the size of the image if we were to save it out, 86.5 megabytes, which is pretty huge. And I want this original image to be pretty large. I can always resize it later. Okay, so this is our image. I could save this right now, but I think the colors aren't quite great. There is a little bit of glare here, but that's not really bothering me too much. So let's look and see what we can do with this. Now, when I was a youngster on Photoshop, what I would do is I would usually just duplicate this layer and then do a bunch of edits to the new layer without losing anything. So you could hold down Control J and just duplicate that layer, make all your changes on this. So like if I wanted to change levels, I could change these levels, and it's like, oh no, that's too much. Well, I still have my layer. That's how I used to do it, and that's foolish. The best way to do this is to actually go to Layer, a new adjustment layer, and then start making your adjustments via this. So brightness and contrast, that's a good one to start with, usually. They've ordered them there in a way that makes sense. And this adjustment layer will adjust everything showing beneath it. So basically every layer beneath it. I don't have other layers to really care about, but what I'm going to do just to show is I'm going to hold down Alt, and I'm just going to hover right here, and I'll click. And now this adjustment layer is only adjusting the image as we see it, this layer here, okay? And down here is our adjustments under the properties. There are these other things that you could explore on your own, but I could adjust the brightness right here. I can make it super bright. I could darken it a little bit. And then if I don't like that, I can make the changes here, or I can change the opacity on this adjustment layer to where it's only affecting like 41% of it. It's like 41% opaque. So it's a little bit transparent, basically is what that means. I'm actually going to darken this just a touch. And the contrast. Contrast is an interesting one. I'd love to get your ideas on this. Contrast is really appealing, but as you adjust your contrast, you end up with colors that were, if you're upping your contrast, you might have colors that are much more separate, becoming very similar. And as you lower your contrast, you retain that difference. So if I did this, some of those colors would kind of like meld together, some of those values especially. But it does look cool, right, when you up that contrast. I have to keep kind of looking over at my painting just to kind of see. I think the contrast does need to go up just a little bit. But there's some things we can adjust. We're not married to any of this yet. So I'm going to click on my layer again. I'm going to go to Adjustment Layer and Levels. Levels is an important one. Levels is going to be way more, give you way more control over things like contrast. So if we look at this, this is the amount of black. And I could just say, let's take all of that out, right? Amount of darkness, really, is the way you can think of it. This is the amount of lightness. I could take that out. I don't really want to mess with that yet. This will up the amount of darkness, okay, while retaining a range of values. This will up the lightness while retaining a level of values. And then this will kind of be our little mixer between the two. Now, I like to mess with this first usually, and I'm going to bring that up a bit. Now we can see how much that did to this. Okay, it's bringing those darks a little darker. And I'm going to zoom in now. We're going to zoom. Now you can zoom in by holding Control and Spacebar and then clicking and dragging left and right. Okay, you can zoom in and out. And I just kind of want to get a good idea of what's happening to my darkest darks here as I mess with these levels. Do I want to make them darker? Oops, I accidentally moved this. That's okay. And I think I do want to make them about as dark as they are here. Okay, so that's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with those levels. And then this is my lightest light, is this waterfall, and I could see if I want to go any lighter with that. And of course, when I go lighter, it adjusts everything. I think pulling in on either side a little bit is usually a decent idea, especially with like a digital painting. With a real painting, I do like to retain a little bit of a range of values because paintings just exhibit a range of values in a different way than a digital painting does. Okay, so those are my levels. You can see how much that changed things. Let's look at our brightness contrast. I'm cool with that. And then let's go to adjustment layers again. Now curves is more fine tuning. You can see this sort of curve thing here. If I click and drag here, I mess with just like everything. I don't even know exactly what I'm messing with here, but and I'm sure there's better ways to explain all this. Sorry, I got an itch on my leg. But this just helps you fine tune a little bit. So you can see, let's look at this rock here for a second. If I go up with this, everything gets a little darker. I do kind of want things to be not quite as dark all around. But you can kind of see, yeah, that's looking a little better there, I think. But now up here, things aren't very dark in sort of my mid-tone range, so I'm going to darken that up a bit. And now we can kind of, let's see. Let's see what that did. Definitely made the colors more vibrant, which in my painting, they're maybe a little less vibrant than that. I like most of those changes. I'm actually going to just kind of shift it a little bit down there, and let's just see. You know, there's probably a better video on this thing. I like to just kind of mess with this until it feels right. And in fact, one of the things I think I could do is probably lower my contrast now, just by a little bit, because I don't want to lose some of these colors down in here. Let's just see what happens if I do that. You can kind of see the effect that all these are having there. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. So now let's go to image, no, not image. Let's go to layer, adjustment layer. Hue and saturation we're going to skip. We're going to go down to color balance. Okay, and this is actually pretty close. It's maybe a little bit on the red side. And I need a little more blues happening. So this is changing the midtones. So when if you know your art, you have your shadows, your highlights, and your midtones. Midtones are just everything kind of between the darkest darks and the lightest lights. So midtones are what most images are mostly made up of, right? So this would shift some of my colors a little bit. And I kind of want to pull them away from the red just a touch and into the green a little bit, okay? So you can see how that changed that. It might not be drastic to you here, but it did change that a bit. And we're going to go to the shadows. And again, we're just going to pull it away from red a little bit and into the blue a little bit. Most of my shadows I was using blue paint. And my camera tends to like make things more red than they should be. I don't know why exactly. So yeah, that's getting a little bit more of that deep forest feel. That's kind of what I want there. Let's go into the highlights. We're not going to have to adjust things too much here, I don't think. Some of this you're doing by feel a little bit. Just the green has to go up a little bit. Yeah. Okay, let's see what happens. Yeah, that's a little closer. I might go just a little bit, bring the opacity down. So you can make your adjustments and make some sort of larger adjustments, and that opacity thing is going to help you a lot, because you can just be like, I think I overdid the adjustments, but I mostly like them. I'm not going to fiddle with all these things. I can just kind of bring the opacity down and kind of control the amount of power this has over my painting. Okay. Now, let's go to adjustment layers again. Let's go to hue saturation. Introduce one of these. It's fine. I'll leave it where it is, but I suppose we could go, down into here. I won't leave it where it is. So you've got three things with hue and saturation. You've got your hue. if I was to adjust this, it would change everything, right? The colors as we think of color. I don't want to change that, so I'll have that at 0. Saturation is how intense that color is, how pure it is. So if I take it down, there's no hue, right? If I go all the way up, it's crazy hue, right? We're living on a radioactive planet with that. And then lightness and darkness is self-explanatory. That's kind of that's just the values, right? So I'd rather not make adjustments to lightness and darkness through this, but saturation I can either go up or down, and I think I'm going to go slightly, well, it's hard to tell actually. Maybe a little bit down. Okay. I think my camera tends to pump a little bit of the vibrancy of my colors in my photos and add a little bit like a redness to it. And I don't love that. So I might need a new camera. So there's our image. And there are other things you could do. So, but some of them aren't in the adjustment layer category. So like exposure right here. That's typically with an RGB color space. You can mess with that, but we're in the CMYK. We're not going to mess with anything else. So here I'm pretty happy with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this out as a copy. So you can hold Control-Alt-S, and that's going to save as a copy. I like to save it on my computer. And I'm going to go to my art. That's not where I want to go. Adam's art? Yeah. Edited art is where we'll put it for now. We're going to save this as a JPEG. Now, you could save it as a TIFF since it's for printing, but a JPEG is a bit more flexible of a document. So I'm going to go JPEG, and we're going to call this Forest Waterfall. Okay. And now I'm going to open up a new document. This is now where we start to make the print. Okay. So actually, you know what I'm going to do? I have a different document. I can open recent 8x10 template. Where is that? 8x10 print template. Okay. So one thing I have here, this is an old painting I did. I have this template that I've created. This is 8x10, 8 inches by 10 inches for my 8x10 paper. I like to have 1 inch margins at the what am I trying to say? The smallest margin I want to be 1 inch. Okay. I can right click on this because it's a smart object, and I can go relink to file. So I've set this up for myself, and we're going to choose, where are you? Forest Waterfall, and place that. Now it's going to be big probably, yeah. So what we want to do is make this smaller and fit within the parameters. It's perfect for an 8x10. This is great. We'll hit done. And now this is sitting perfectly within this print size. Okay. Now I have a smart filter here, and what I have is the unsharp mask. Yeah, that's fine. So this unsharp mask, I didn't discover this on my own, but it creates basically the proper sharpness for viewing distance for size. And I looked up an article on this, and for an 8x10 print, these are the settings you want. So 95% sharpness, 1.2 radius, 12 level threshold, things I don't understand really. But by having this here, I'm able to now print this, and it's going to look good in terms of its sharpness. Now sharpness has to do with seeing those nice textures. Okay, we want to see these nice textures of the paint. Now when I zoom in too far, it gets pixelated, right? Obviously. But this is going to print on paper, and you're not going to see all these little things that we see right here. Like this blurriness is going to be sharp, because right now this to this is 1 inch of real space, and for here right now in front of me on my monitor, it's like 3 inches. So this is more like right about here is probably more similar to the print quality. Actually, maybe a little bit backed out even more. Okay, this is going to be more similar to the actual print quality. So now that I'm ready to print this, what I'll do is I will go to File, print. Okay, but one other thing you can do is you just hit Control P, and that'll print it. Now everybody's printer is different, and the printer I use is the Epson XP15000 series, which is nothing top of the line. It's just a little bit better for like making decent at-home prints. It prints well. It has a 6-color processing system, and I think it was a couple hundred, maybe $300, something like that. But what I want to show you here is the settings. So if I go to print settings, there's some things you want to do depending on your paper. I use Red River Aurora white paper, at 250 GSM, I think is what it is. So it has a rear paper feed. I like to have that. I've got the document size 8x10. I don't do borderless. That kind of throws off measurements if you do that. The paper type is the most similar is Velvet Fine Art paper. Whoever you buy your paper from, it should tell you if it's a decent paper. It'll tell you the print settings you want to have. Color, it's a color document, high quality. We can kind of forget a lot of this stuff. Let's go to more options. And you have something here that's called color correction. I have this on custom, and if I hit image options, or not image options, if I hit advanced, what I want to do is have no color adjustment. And this is for one reason and one reason only. Because I want Photoshop to manage the colors. Those are like print settings. I want Photoshop to manage the colors, and I want my printer profile to be Red River Aurora Art White for the XP 15000. Okay. Now, that's because that's the paper that I'm using and the printer that I'm using. Depending on your paper supplier, you would want to have different settings. You'd want to have that printer profile. The reason for this is because there's such complexity to taking a tangible object like a painting, converting it to digital, editing it in the digital space, and then sending it to become another physical object, right? And then you're dealing with the amount of ink that you're using, you're dealing with the printer itself. There's a lot of variables. And so they've created these things called printer profiles so that based on the paper you're using and the printer you're using, you will get as close of an approximation to what you see on your screen as you could possibly get, as long as your screen settings are good, right? There's been a lot of people, I used to work with digital art a lot, and there's a lot of people who will be like, these colors are wrong, like, but most likely what the problem is that the colors on your monitor are not optimized for viewing correct colors. So you can go through, there's ways you can do this online. You can adjust just the monitor settings themselves. There are specialized monitors, which are out of my price range, to really make sure that your colors are correct. And there's equipment and stuff for that. I just kind of judge it by eye, and if I need to make adjustments, I'll make adjustments. But at this point, this is ready to print, and so I will print, and then I will show you what it looks like. Oh, by the way, there is this rendering intent thing. I think it defaults to relative color metric. I've read somewhere that perceptual is important, or it's like it's better. I don't think it's a huge difference. And then to always have black point compensation clicked in, okay? You leave everything else the same, and we should be good to print. So I'm going to do that in a second, and then I'll get back to you. All right, so I got my print printed off here. You can kind of see what it looks like there. Turned out pretty good, I think. There's a couple things I think I want to shift on it, but let's hold it up and see. Well, yeah, you can see that the quality is nice. The I don't know how well this thing shows that, but it's a good quality. It has good sharpness to it. It's like it has the right details in the right spot. I'm happy with it. So that's my printing process. That's how I edit a print for selling. Now, if I was to do a different sized print, I would just use that source edited image and just bring it into a different sized document and print that way. Basically the same thing. Now the size of this just works perfectly for an 8x10. For an 11x14, it wouldn't work quite the same, but it is what it is. So I don't think it would. It shouldn't. So that's that. Hopefully this was insightful to you. If you have any comments or questions about anything, put them in the comments. If you have anything you could share with me, that would be great. Also, of course, a subscription, 2% of the people who watch this are subscribed to my channel, which is cool, I guess. But yeah, likes, shares, and subscribes and all that jazz. That actually really does help, and it helps me feel like I'm contributing something and doing something good for everybody. So hopefully this helped you, and thanks for watching.